Alright, so having done a review of the Black Prism, I figured it was finally time for a review of a sequel. And it's really finally a thing. Okay, maybe I kind of already did do a review of a sequel, but this is a full-length review, not just a short. Alright, I'm gonna admit it, I loved the first book, and since I own the next two books in the series, I figured I would just move on to the next one. Although, because I really want to know what's going to happen. So without further ado, let's get into Section 1, Chapter 1 through 15. A lot is happening here, and I don't want to, nor do I have the time to delve into it all. But basically, Weeks introduces us back into this world with an action scene of Gavin versus the sea monster. This is a great way to remind people of how the magic works and where we left off. Of course, if you, like I did, just went straight to the sequel, you don't really need the reminder, but can enjoy a sweet action fight. Afterwards, we learn that Gavin wants Kip to become a blackguard, and make sure Kip overhears when he tells Ironfist to let Kip have it easy. You know, motivating Kip to prove he doesn't need it to be easy. This splits our plot in two, and separating Kip and Gavin from the get-go is a bold move, since in the first book, we learned how dependent Kip are. However, I do believe it is probably the correct move. This allows for Kip to stay in the more known world for the reader, that is, and expand that more, with teachings and Andros' plans with him, while Gavin goes off to do stuff in the unknown world, again unknown for the reader. I think this complements each other really well, cause if Kip had to stay with Gavin, we might not learn more about the Chromeria and how it teaches new drafter, or how Andros Guile reacts to meeting his bastard grandson. All in all, I really like this start. I think Weeks does some great things. I'm ready to see where he's going with it. Section 2, Chapter 16 through 33. Oh boy, stuff's happening. I almost forgot to stop reading. First things first, Kip is now a student at Chromeria, and a lot is happening there. But in order for this to not be an hour plus long review, I'll pick some key points I'd like to discuss. Andros and Kip. It's a blast reading about their meetings and how it actually is really good for Kip's character development. I think even though Kip is supposed to hate it and all that, it will make him a stronger and more confident character. The second is a fun little science class where they have to calculate how much blue Luxon they need to draft in order to replace a broken counterweight. And Kip being Kip has no clue how to calculate that. So instead he comes up with an idea for a sleeve for the counterweight so it can be used even when broken. This does give him the highest marks, but the teacher tells him next time it's a 0. I love that scene because the entire section is, class is read out as teaching math and telling how it used to be a 12 number system and all that heretic and now it's a 12 and 10 number system, etc. all that. But it just proves that you don't need always to be the smart one to come up with the smart ideas, and also it really highlights how Kip is a guile. Another funny thing is at the end of the section where they are having a religious gathering. I forgot its name right now. They're talking about the Lightbringer. That's the name of the book. Actually, it's the series, but shh. But other than sparking my curiosity and make me want to learn more about him because Kip is curious, I'm more interested in the first part where Kleidos Blue. Kleidos is doing a speech about ancient Parian and some discoveries they've done. And this is where I think Weeks really shows you understand what he's created. He hasn't just created a place to learn magic and worship it. No, he's created a university. This is important because it adds way more life and character to what's going on. The fact that the Blue Tower is really interested in ancient text and their meaning, while other classes are more interested in engineering and science part, is exactly what we see at a university. Not everything is STEM, although I would love that, but that's probably because I'm an engineer. Finally, I want to talk about Taya. She can apparently draft a color called Peril, which is lower than subred on the color scale. And looking at our own scale of, quote-unquote colors, that means she can either see microwaves or radio waves, depending on how deep down it is. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool way to add magic to this world. Or add more magic to it. It being useless because no one has bothered to study it because it isn't part of the same main colors is pretty interesting way to drag religion into prevent the further study of something. And I hope that it'll show some conflict within the Chromeria, but we'll never know. I also hope we learn more about this quote-unquote color, and it could be cool if there's like an X-ray or gamma ray equivalent at the other end of the spectra. Anyways, I think we're ready for Section 3, Chapter 34 through 40. This is quite a short section, but I think a lot of setup is happening. The plot with Taya and Kip getting special training to make sure they become blackguards is so interesting. It is not just a plot armor thing for Kip, as it is, but the thing is that the blackguard doesn't care about the religious aspect of like Taya's color, but just see it pragmatically. And they are partners, so they have to stay and work together. However, they still have to pass like all others, which I think is really a cool concept, and it's going to be really fun to follow. Now, I have this little tiny thing. Why do the books I enjoy the most have main characters who love to read a lot? I never thought about it before now, but I guess because I can relate. Or maybe it's just a coincidence, I don't know. Take it as you want, I think it's a coincidence. And that's mainly because Kip loves to read now, apparently. To study, and that's pretty cool. And it adds a lot to his character. That of course he's not the strong person, so he'll have to be book smart, or smart in general. In the other end of the section, Gavin is having a meeting with a woman called the Third Eye, who is a seer. Here they discuss how to have all the refugees live on her island, while she obviously tries to make Gavin sleep with her, which fails because he doesn't want Karris to get even more mad at him. If that's even possible. Oh god, that woman's mad at him all the time. All in all, this quite little section is interesting. Not a lot of action or something like that, but a lot of setup, and I like that. I can't wait to see how Kip and Ted does in their training. Section 4, chapter 41 through 59. A lot happens in this section. Let's look at some of the main talking points. Gavin finding the blue bane, or guard, or whatever you want to call it, was an intense sequence. I didn't actually expect him to succeed already, but I'm not disappointed, it was epic. The way Weeks uses the small talk answers the seer gave Gavin to him to help him succeed really tells that the seer knows the future is not set in stone, and that if she tells him too much, he won't do it at the right time or the right way. The Bane's Island was quite the area, oh boy. I didn't expect it to be a literal floating island of blue luxen. Of course it is. I don't know why I expected something else. I guess I'm dumb, I don't know. I suspect the other color banes or guards will have their own quirks like that. Moving on to Kip and Janus Boric, Weeks have created what until now seems like a pretty hard magic system. The addition of the Seer and Janus Boric being the mirror, Janus Boric not the Seer, it changes everything, because all we know is that they need light and the mirror cannot paint light, which to me feels like quite soft magic. I'm not opposed to it, I love it, I think it's awesome, I think Janus is cool. I also think the Seer is pretty cool. But it still threw me off a little. Janus is a fun character and really strikes me as the type of genius who is really too smart for their own good. Alright. Time for the big boy part. The Andros and Kip part. This is by far the best part of the story. It's so good. The banter and the fact that Kip is being snarky with him, whereas when we've seen Gavin with Andros, it has always been Andros who were in charge. Here Andros is still in charge, but Kip is fighting back in a way that Gavin can't do it. I love that. The card game matches are so interesting, even if Weeks doesn't go through all the moves and details. I would love that, but I'm really not gonna fault a non-game designer for not designing a game when he's writing a fantasy book. It really feels like he's playing something like Magic the Gathering, and as a person who plays that, I don't mind that at all. I think that's awesome. Now, time for me to discuss a little thing, because I love this book, and this series, as you can probably tell, one of my favorite series. There are some things I would like to criticize. The Gavin part of the story feels like a different book than the rest of the book, and sadly the same does for the story with the Color Prince. I know this is all built up, but it really isn't as good as the rest. Don't get me wrong, it's good. But if you've just been with Kip, then going to either Gavin or Color Prince is really a drop in enthusiasm for me. I think it would be better if Weeks made the Color Prince sequences something we only heard about from spy reports to Gavin or something like that, maybe rumors or whatever. And then maybe even remove Gavin's part completely from the book and put it into a separate book that explains what he's up to, while in this book we only hear about the Kip and then the Color Prince. But as I said, it's none of it is bad. It's just a bit too disconnected for my taste. Anyways, let's move on to the next section. Section 5, Chapter 60 through 82. Oh boy, this is another one of those sections where there's a lot happen. So I feel like in order for it to make most sense, we can take it character by character. Kip, of course, won Taya from Andrews. I mean, this was never any doubt about it. But the way he did it, by using the heretic cards that are illegal to own, but not to use in the game, was really smart. Especially since Andros kinda does the same. I love that game, and how mad Andros get at the so-called cheating, while Kip stays completely neutral and just asks for the papers to own Taya. The other thing is the entire part with Kip and Iron Fist, where Iron Fist lets Kip know how happy he is that Kip trusts him, but also that he shouldn't do that ever again. The talk and how Iron Fist at first doesn't quite believe Kip until he learned the cards are original new cards. It's an amazing sequence. This of course leads me to the death of Janus Boric. The fight scene where Kip takes on the two assassins is super well done and super fun and interesting. I love how Weeks is never holding back with the gore of the fights. A final thing with this is how Janus hit most important new cards in the most obvious place. It's so brilliant and in character for her to realize that the best place to hide something isn't always the most secret place. Final two things with Kip now. Firstly, he's a full spectrum polychrome, like his father, which is awesome and cool and would normally prevent him from becoming a blackguard. I think it's just about the right time to reveal into Kip, and he's probably one of the most valuable people in Chromeria now. Simply because so much confusing stuff is going on, so it just adds on. Second, I want to talk about the final part of the section where Kip and Taya discusses their chances and the order of students become a blackguard. I think Kip and Taya have great chemistry and that their relationship is really realistic. And I could see Weeks both make them fall in love, but also just stay friends. Like, that's how friendship works. You could go either way without problems. And you can kind of feel like Kip is falling for Taya. But it seems like she kinda is, but kinda isn't, and I like that. I don't think Weeks will let them become a couple, to be honest. It doesn't, to me it doesn't seem like it, but I could still see it happen. So let's talk a little bit about Karris before we talk about Dazen, and then we'll finally get to Gavin. So after spending all that time being mad and being around Gavin and getting the letter from his mom explaining the truth about everything, it just feels so good to have Karris realize the truth. It also feels great for her how she realizes all the lies and how none of the lies actually added up, and even that her suspicion around Gavin's true identity was correct. Of course, how that ends we'll talk about when we get to Gavin, but let me just say, I love the entire little Karris section with her realizing the truth. So far in both the first and second book, the parts with Dazen have been sparse and at times a little on the boring side, but now things are finally moving somewhere. I'm excited for him to be so close to escape, and the timing couldn't be better since Gavin can't balance the colors anymore and needs Dazen to do it. I think it was about time that those parts got interesting. Yeah, Weeks of course hits it out of the park. Okay, so when it comes to Gavin, there are really only 3 things I want to highlight as things that stood out to me. The first is of course the Spectrum meeting, where he basically got an entire satrapy removed, and therefore also the new green satrap was removed. Then he manipulates the Spectrum by basically saying what they already know and agrees with, but without what it means, and that's brilliant politics. I love when Weeks writes these highly political scheming scenes, because I think this is where he's the strongest. This leads into the second thing right away, with him raging at his father and telling him that at the next freeing he will be there, or they can do it earlier. Basically, we finally see Gavin get some balls against his father, which we can see when Andros is trying to make Gavin marry one of 3 women he has chosen for Gavin. And finally, we see him standing up for himself in the same way Kip is capable of. And that's brilliant, and I love that it's happening in reverse order. That of course the most insecure and scared person gets to grow up first. The final thing is Gavin killing Anna. Oh boy, this is gonna be bad. The fact that he is so ready to die to Dazen and let him take over after talking with him and decide that was not true. That was a great read. I failed that miserably. I have to be honest, if Gavin and Dazen had switched places, this book would probably have dropped very low on my score. the aftermath of that murder where the Blackguards are covering for him since they have such an insane amount of respect for him is amazing. I also love how the White actually knows they lied, but she knows how important he is for the world. And I think we're gonna see way more of this in the future. Section 6, chapter 83 through 111. I figured quite early that Weeks was a little formulaic. Not that it's a bad thing, it just, I was then reading and waiting for the big battle to start. The big battle was this time fluently incorporated into the rest of the book, which shows that Weeks is growing as an author, given that the disconnection between the battle for Garriston and the rest of the books was my main complaint of the first book. Staying at disconnection topic, the book still suffers from a disconnection between anything about the Color Prince and Kip and Gavin. This is mitigated a little by having the final battle for Rue be a more smoothly transitioned in by having smaller skirmishes first. But I still think the disconnection is there, and I hope Weeks will in the next book remove it even more. Now on to some of the earlier stuff in this section, because one of the biggest points is Kip joining the Blackguard. Well, almost. Kip being Kip, he almost made it. Kip almost. But this time it wasn't his fault. Entirely. There was a conspiracy that proved to be a plot. The multiple of the recruits wanted Kip to fail, and was even paid to do that. Then, dumb as Kip can be, he challenges one of them whom he knows he can't beat. The fights are awesome, action-packed, and Weeks really shows that the small fights are where he's the strongest when it comes to action. Making Kip get so close to just tear away his only dream is bold. Most authors would have let Kip pass through on his own. I don't fault Weeks for finally letting him through when Crooksor cripples one of the plotters under the pretense of it being practice. It was the right choice, but by ruining it first for Kip was so heart-wrenching. I loved it. The fight against the Gargantua was pure epicness. It was chaotic, it was dangerous, it was full of twists and turns, it was fun. I think Weeks really hit the nail on the coffin here with what his magic system can do. Only thing is, the name is a bit on the nose. But I guess from his description of the ship's size in the real world, it would probably have a name like that too. Gavin and Karris getting married was about time. I was beginning to think it might never happen, but I'm so happy it did. The fact Karris said she chose Gavin and chose to love him really made me think. Does this mean that love isn't just an attraction, but something we can choose to make our lives how we want it? This to me means that Karris, or maybe even Weeks himself, but that's not necessarily the case, believes that love at first sight might be possible, but that is more of a physical attraction, whereas the true deep love is the one we decide to allow for each other. Which makes perfect sense when you add in how Gavin says he can't love Kip as a father, but Karris says he won't let himself. Gavin is holding himself back, because he still thinks Kip as his brother's son and not his own. I think what Karris is saying is deep down we chose who we want what type of connection to. I think that is a way stronger message to send than love is first sight, which we have seen multiple times in this book is Gavin wanting sex and nothing else. This shows that we as people have a great influence over our lives, and this really for me is very important. Now, I think it's time for something that isn't as philosophical. The fight against the Green Bane and the parts of Levantea. I think the way Weeks did this book's major fight was so much better than the first. The first book had all of it from Kip's view, and it got a little small even though it was a giant siege. Now I spread out the views and the fight to a much bigger area, and it really shows the scale of the fight. But it also shows that even though it's a big fight, not all of it is pure action. Liv and Taya are both on stealthier missions, whereas Kip, Gavin and Karris are on the front lines in open battle. I think it served the fight really well to break it up and show how some war strategy and how things play out. Finally, I want to talk about my opinion on the final part of the section. The death of Gavin and Andros being a red-white. It was such a chaotic fight, but it was fun and entertaining, and I love how the techniques Karris had shown the Blackguard recruits early in the book were used by Kip. It was a great piece of late Chekhov's gun. Also the fact that Kip stabs Andros and Gavin gets stabbed and dies. Can't wait to see how the Chromaria handles Andros being a white. Section 7, Chapter 112 to the end. Let me start with Kip. I'm so excited for him to be reunited with Simon. I think in book 3 we're going to have so much fun seeing them work towards ending both the Chimera and the Color Prince. Yes, that is my prediction for where the series is going. They're going to try and take down both, although it will start with just the color print, but bit by bit they will also tear down the Kumeria. I also hope it's true that they are brothers like Simon said, cause that would be so fun. Gavin isn't dead. I know, I read the ending. I'm kinda happy, but also a little sad. I'm happy because I like Gavin. I think he adds a lot to the book and he's a great character and fun and all that. But I'm sad because I think it was have been such a Game of Thrones-esque move, and it would have been fun if he were just killed off. I just now hope he gets a proper ending in the book and doesn't stay a slave to Gunnar. But now I'm very curious about his colorblindness. Andros apparently isn't a white anymore. The knife, blade, sword thingy that Kip had probably removed some of the drafting that a user had done, and since it barely got into Andros' shoulder, I guess it only removed some of his drafting, aka the white part, while for Gavin it was a huge blow to the stomach, if I recall correct, and therefore it removed all of his drafting capabilities. Those are just my theories. Some book theory! I don't know, I haven't watched Game Theory in a long time. That's just a theory. A book theory. Oh, there we go. Got it. Anyway, it's time for the conclusion. The series had a really strong start with the first book, and I think Weeks manages to keep the ball rolling without too much stumbling throughout. Some of the things the book is lacking is carried over from the first book, mainly the feeling of disconnection, albeit being less than the first book. I think the series is showing how much Weeks is growing as an author, and I love that. Generally, so far, the books are super fun and exciting to read, and I can't wait to continue with the third book. The books get a 8 out of 10. Better than the old one.